Hi everyone, welcome to the video on the research paragraph. I'm just going to do the same as I did with the first video and just show you an example of it in use. So this is a really interesting article about buying ethical Christmas presents that are made properly. Now it does give an anecdote during it about how the writer wanted to buy toys when their child was younger, like ethical toys. But I want to take you to this paragraph here, or at least the first half of it. So if we look at this one, it says, it's not just cheap toys at fault. Disney's Sing and Sparkle Ariel doll retails at $34.99. This is a high-end gift for families struggling to make ends meet. So there's our first fact, the price of a toy. Disney, a company like that, can be trusted to pay their elves a living wage, surely? No, as it happens, the workforce making these dolls are paid as little as 1p per doll, another fact. Some worked 175 hours of overtime in 1 month, another fact. They sleep at their stations and work until they can't see straight, another fact. And for 85p an hour, these elves are little more than modern day slaves to a consumer society that may have, dare I say it, got a little bit out of hand. It goes on to talk about other things, but that paragraph I think is really interesting as a good example of how you can put lots of facts together, but it still feels like it's still persuading me that this isn't an okay doll to buy if that's how these people are working, and it's just got all those numbers one after another that are kind of tied together. So there's a good example of a research paragraph. This person's obviously researched into a toy that was popular that year. Now what I'm going to do is give you some tips for this paragraph and write one with you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just go through some top tips for the research paragraph so that we know the types of things we should be including and what to avoid, and then we will go on to writing a paragraph together. So let's start with this is going to help you actually write it. What you need to make sure you're doing is use a range of research. So don't just give one thing. So examples of the types of things you want to include. You can have surveys / questionnaires. You might have experts giving their opinion. You might have local opinions, as long as they're relevant, but I'll come back to that in a minute. You might have an example of maybe a case study that a university has done. So those are the types of things you want to include, a mixture, and obviously any factual information that's relevant to the topic that you're doing. Okay, the second thing is we want to make everything sound valid, which often will be helped by making sure you use numbers. So for example, if you're going to give a survey, what you want to do is you want to say how many people took it, and then you might give more than one percentage. So you might say, in a recent survey carried out by Ofsted, it found that 87% of schools still set homework on a regular basis, whereas 80 of those 13% of schools, an average of 70% of students believed that they were happier than they would be if their teachers set homework. Overall, this study was conducted into, 20,000 schools, for example. So you're giving all that kind of factual information, really creating that rounded picture for the reader, so that they think that your research is interesting and valid. So the next thing that you want to make sure you do is, if you're going to use an expert or a local opinion, use people relevant to the topic. So if you were doing a piece on celebrity, I mentioned in the first video that one of the past answers was on that, you might ask someone like Gemma Collins, who has been in The Only Way is Essex and has become basically a reality TV star. But if the question was on homework, you're not going to ask her. That would be strange. You're going to ask head teachers or Ofsted or the Department for Education or somebody who works in teacher training in a local university. You have to think carefully about who you would ask if you're in the situation of researching an article. The next thing that I want to say is, in the first paragraph I said, you know, hyperbole, exaggeration might be a good thing. In this paragraph I'm saying avoid hyperbole, make everything realistic. And the word realistic is the name of this paragraph really, because it is treading on thin ice, making up your own research, okay? And you've got to be careful how you do it. And the purpose of us making up research is because we're aware that an article would typically include research. It would typically include all these things, but you're not in the circumstances to do it. But you wouldn't write something like, I asked 5 of my friends and 100% of them said that homework's pointless and rubbish and they don't like it. They're not relevant to the topic. I mean, maybe they're students, but they're not really relevant to the topic. It's not a great number, 5 and 100%, and it doesn't sound realistic. It doesn't sound even useful for somebody reading it. So make sure that you cover those things. And the last thing I'm going to say is avoid listing facts one after the other. So in the example we just looked at, it gave you the money that the item cost, then it talks about how the workers were treated, then it mentioned how many hours they were working, how much they were paid, it talked a little bit about their circumstance. So it was kind of like a story that it was creating through the facts. It could have just said, this toy is $39.99, full stop. The workers earn 1p, full stop. They work 10 hours, full stop. It's not constructed like that. And you've got to be really careful that this paragraph doesn't sound just like you are making up a series of facts one after the other. You've got to kind of weave them together. Now, a reminder that for these videos I am using the example plan from the very first video, the second video actually, that goes through the planning process, and from the question was in the first video about homework, which is a past exam question. So I've done this one now, haven't I? So I'm moving on to my research. I've mentioned something about Childline, I've mentioned something about a local school head teacher banning homework and grades increasing. So those are 2 of the things that I definitely want to include. There are other things I might want to weave into the story. So first of all, I'm thinking about how my first paragraph ended. So let's just have a look at that. So I mentioned something about soul-destroying, time-wasting enemy of childhood, homework. So I might just link onto that, just so my paragraphs are cohesive and they follow one after another. So, in a recent survey carried out by Childline, I mean, you can use Childline. I use if it's like something relevant to students, because they do carry out these surveys. But you could use Ofsted or Department of Education. You want to use a big kind of brand that is likely to carry out these surveys. And then I'm going to link back to that final line. So I called it enemy of childhood. So in a recent survey carried out by Childline, this enemy of childhood was found to be affecting, not effecting, affecting students Now there's more than one student I'm talking about, so the apostrophe goes at the end. To be affecting students' mental health, sleeping patterns, I'm going to do a little list of 3, and confidence. Okay, so I've introduced the study. I haven't just gone straight into the facts. I'm going to use it. I'm going to do it now though. So, of 50,000 teenagers questioned over the course of their secondary schooling, 70%, no, 70 even sounds just too obvious, I'm going to go for 72. 72% felt their well-being had been affected by the amount of homework they needed to do. A further, I don't know, I think probably less people sleep have been affected, so I'm going to go for a further 67% stated they had gone without sleep to complete a project. Lovely. I've done a lot of my sentences, so I've got in, then I've gone in with of. So I'm going to start with I'm just going to mix up my sentence at the start. I'm just going to go for significantly. I've not got enough space here. Significantly, comma, both parents and schools are unaware of these startling statistics. However, one local head teacher, so now I'm weaving the two together. One local head teacher, Mr. I can't remember what did I call his name? Was it John Foxton? Of Kilton. I've just been reading a book that's set in Kilton, so there we go. Kilton Academy has limited, let's say he still does homework, he does revision, limited homework to revision only in students' exam years. He notes our students are much happier behaviour has improved, and our recent results show students outperform the national average. Okay, so I'm kind of getting to the end of my paragraph now, so I'm going to say perhaps Mr. Foxton has a valid point. Colon, homework impacts not only grades but every aspect of a teenager's life. There we go. So, ended with this idea that homework impacts lots of aspects of a teenager's life, which is easy now to move into my next paragraph, which is my counter-argument, where I can kind of start off by saying there possibly are positive aspects of homework, but then I'm going to say why those aspects are wrong. Lovely, that's a research paragraph, and hopefully you'll join me in the next video for counter-arguments.